Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is Bourbon 3. This is the third annual video I do on bourbon, whiskey, scotch, that general category of dark liquid that some of us love so much. I started doing this because I'm a bit of a connoisseur. I do enjoy bourbon, and people wanted to hear my opinions. And once people found out that I liked bourbon and whiskey, I started getting them as gifts randomly from students at classes and from other people, kind of beside the point. But throughout the year I do try new bourbons, new whiskeys. I tend to stay away from scotch generally. Covered that before, not really super important. But I like to do this video annually because it's kind of fun and it gives people an idea of what I'm into. So getting started, I'm just going to go through some of my bourbon experiences through the year, whiskey, bourbon experiences through the year, and cover what I liked, what I didn't like. Now I found as I get older that I'm a little less adventurous, not so much as I'm afraid to try new things, as I know what I like and it's good, so there's no real reason to seek out anything necessarily better, or at least go out of my way to do it. So if I come across something new, great, but I'm not going to spend a ridiculous amount of money and buy 7 or 8 different bottles of bourbon or whiskey a week or a month just to see what's good and what's new. So it's kind of a, if I encounter it, I'm going to try it, but I'm not going to go out of my way. My standard and my staple remains the same. Bullet's always been my go-to since I discovered it. It's what some would consider to be a well or a bottom shelf. And that's necessarily true, and in that category it kind of sits there right next to Jameson. Now I'm no stranger to Jameson Irish whiskey. I was in the Army and I have been to punk rock concerts. I'm well aware of what Jameson is, and some people put them in the same category. I really don't. Jameson's good, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't mix well with anything if you're into mixing, as well as, I should say, as Bullet does. I'm not a real big rye fan, which is weird because Bullet does have a higher rye content in the standard non-rye offering. But it's just enough, it's got a good flavor, it's mellow, and it can mix well with just about anything that you would, a non-madman, would mix bourbon or whiskey with. I got a bottle of this Evan Williams single barrel as a gift from a student, and as you can see, I've been enjoying it. I like it a lot. It's got a bit of a stronger flavor to it than some of the other bourbons I've tried, but it's not as strong as, say, like something that was finished in like casks or something like that. It's a really good flavor, and it's definitely something worth checking out. It's very similar to like a Blade and Bow, which I've talked about in the past, and it's also similar to like the old I think it's Elijah Craig small batch. So there's a very similar flavor there. For all I know, it's the exact same thing in the bottle. No way of really knowing that. But it's definitely worth checking out. I got this bottle of Bull Run as a gift for Christmas. Usually this video comes out a little bit before Christmas. As long as it comes out before the end of the year, happy about that. But I'm glad I waited because this is really, really amazing. It evaporates in your mouth, much similar to what you'd get from a white whiskey, which I was pleasantly surprised by. And another fact about the Bull Run is it's finished in wine casks, Pinot Noir, and it's from Portland, Oregon. Not necessarily known for their whiskeys, their bourbons, well, anything but necessarily wine as far as I know. This is probably the first bourbon whiskey I've tried that was finished in this way that I actually like. Usually if it's finished in some kind of cask, say an oak cask or something that had previously been occupied by the liquor. I've tried bourbons that were finished in rum casks. I've tried bourbons that were finished in white wine casks, red wine casks. They usually taste like regretful dirt. This one doesn't. I'm very happily impressed with this. It's not necessarily something I would mix with something because the flavor is a little bit more robust than what you'd want for mixing with like a Diet Coke or lime or something like that. This is something that I would sip neat or on some rocks and finish it over the period of 2 or 3 hours. This was another gift. This is actually my second bottle. I finished the first one. I got it probably February, March timeframe. Sipped on it throughout the year, periodically. It's Jefferson's Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, very small batch. The VSB is very important because I tried just the regular Jefferson's and it definitely did not have the same flavor, which is what you'd expect. You'd expect a very small batch offering or a single barrel offering to have a more specific flavor than the general run-of-the-mill offering, and that's definitely true with the Jefferson's. Can't really necessarily compare it to anything. It does have a little bit more of a spice to the flavor. So if you're into something that's a little bit more for lack of a better term, salty. It's definitely something worth checking out. Elijah Craig Small Batch, always a good choice. This has been a regular favorite of mine since an alumni gave it to me a couple years ago, and I every now and then pick up a bottle. Generally I have 1 or 2 bottles of bourbon in the house, rotate them, maybe have 1 or 2 a week. I've had this bottle for a little bit while, so I wasn't able to replace it with anything else. Definitely didn't try as many bourbons and whiskeys this year as I did last year. But this is definitely something worth checking out. The thing I like about it the best is mixing it with like a Diet Coke or a Coke. Caramels really come out, and it's well neat, and it tastes just as good on ice. Let the ice mellow, let the water bring out some more of those natural flavors. It's definitely a smoother taste. It doesn't have the same backburn as you're going to get from other bourbons or whiskeys. Basil Hayden's is probably always going to be 1 of 2 bottles I will definitely have in the house. This is like a candy whiskey to me. It's a Kentucky straight bourbon. And just like I said, it's more of a candy. It mixes with everything. It would probably mix with things that you shouldn't mix it with. If you mix this with vodka or Pabst Blue Ribbon, it would probably still taste good because it's Basil Hayden's. It is a little bit more expensive bottle, maybe mid-shelf, top shelf, depending on how you view things. But it's mellow. It's mellow enough to be drank neat on the rocks. Or like I said, you can mix it with just about anything and you're going to get a really, really good flavor. And of course, my go-to celebration special occasion is always going to be Blanton's, the little globe of goodness. It is a little bit harder to find these days. I think that's because it showed up in John Wick and every single gun guy out there saw it, recognized it, or wanted to know what it was and started buying it up. A liquor store not far from me, he usually gets 2 or 3 bottles of this a month now. It used to be a little bit more. He was able to get a case. So I can still get it, but I've heard from many, many people who know I drink Blanton's that it's almost impossible to find based on their region. If you find a bottle within 150 miles, drive and get it. Just remember that it should be a special occasion type of thing, and I would not mix this with anything because you're just going to ruin the experience. I always encounter something that's just awful, terrible, should not be consumed by human beings, should not be used as improvised fuel. It shouldn't even exist. This year, a well-defended title is Black Dirt. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why in God's name would you buy something called Black Dirt and expect it to taste good? And you'd be absolutely correct. I should have never done this. But I figured anybody that had the balls to name their whiskey Black Dirt probably had something substantive to stand behind it. They don't. This tastes awful. The flavor is analogous to potting soil mixed with lukewarm bathwater from a hobo. It's terrible. It shouldn't be consumed by anyone. The only I guess, good thing about Black Dirt is it's not expensive to make the mistake of buying it, and it does have a high evaporation ratio, if you will, similar to white whiskey, so it kind of burns off in your mouth and tastes pretty much like ethanol when it does that. Don't buy this. If you don't believe me, go out and buy it, and then you can put in the comment section, hey, I didn't take your advice. I bought Black Dirt. It was terrible, and now I feel bad for myself, and I think I've gone wrong in my life. That's kind of what's going to happen. So I would stay well away from this, but if you're, you're super curious, go ahead and pick it up and see if maybe your opinion is different. But I would never drink this again in my life, even at gunpoint. So that's the bourbon episode, whiskey episode for the year. For some of you that this is your first time seeing the episode, maybe you're a recent subscriber and stuff, you're like, hey, I thought I was watching a gun channel. No, not necessarily. People ask my opinion on a multitude of things, and sometimes I do videos on topics that don't necessarily have anything to do with guns, firearms, training, tactics, self-defense, anything like that. And I'm an adult, and it's my channel, and I can do what I want. But it's something I like to put out there because I know I enjoy the occasional bourbon or whiskey, and I'm sure plenty of you do as well. So I'm just giving you an idea of what's good for me. I'm Eric Allen with Sage Dynamics. Choose your bourbon accordingly.